Welcome to the BZen Wellness Podcast, where we journey through personal stories of transformation and resilience.
This is a space for us to share insights from our experiences and the wisdom of the experts and mentors who have guided us.
I'm your host, Jonah Boersma, certified life and relationship coach.
And I'm your host, Brittany Boersma, registered yoga teacher, breathwork facilitator, and ceremonialist.
If you're enthusiastic about personal development, you're in the right place.
Let's dig in. Welcome, dear hearts. And just to kick things off, it's important for us to take a deep breath all together. Collective inhale through the nose and sigh it all the way. Now we can begin. We have our dear sister, Caitlyn Howe here.
I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you for being here.
It's so nice to have you here, Caitlyn. I would like to tell y'all who Caitlyn is. Through deep study with plant medicine, world-class mentors, and proven spiritual and holistic modalities of healing, Caitlyn has served as a teacher in the Fit for Service community program for 6 years as a guide of the heart for emotional healing and transformational experiences, while hosting healing retreats, festival workshops, and creative expression classes. She also is the creator of the League of Queens women's program. And as a poet, a writer, a ritual artist, she helps people transform patterns of self-sabotage and suffering into superpowers.
Yes.
Using playful shadow work and embodiment practices, her mission is to help humanity release the armor of the heart and live a life of passion. How amazing.
It's a fun dharma to pursue.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for welcoming me onto this show. I'm so happy to be here and love you both so much.
We love you.
It's so great to have you here. Caitlyn and I met initially through the Fit for Service program. And when Fit for Service started, I didn't really know what I was getting myself into, but I knew that I was like ready for a new community of people. I needed a new network so badly. And the first Fit for Service summit was here in Austin, Texas. And I showed up on the very last day of the summit. I think it was either 3 or 4 days. I showed up for the last day. So I was super late. And the very first thing that I went to was kind of a pivot. There was supposed to have been like sand volleyball day and like everyone was just going to hang out, but Austin had crazy weather.
Yes.
And it was super cold and super windy. So like that got scratched. And instead there were a couple offerings and I chose to go to the sound bath. It was a gong bath at Black Swan Yoga.
Yes.
And I showed up like just before the class started, throw my mat down, and I'm kind of seeing in the crowd in the room, like, oh, I recognize that guy from Instagram. And like, oh, I think her. And then moments later, Caitlyn rolls her mat out next to mine, right next to mine, and looks at me and says, oh my God, you're here. And I was like, yeah, I made it. You totally like welcomed me with the warmest, most wide open arms. And in that moment, coming into this new group late where everyone had already had this full weekend of experiences together, I was a little bit nervous and you eased all of my nerves like immediately. The sound bath was amazing and awesome. And afterwards you communicated with me some more. You were like, oh my God, like where you been? I thought you were going to be here. And I'm like, well, we're here now. You suggested some places for me to eat.
I remember it vividly. Yes.
And I just felt like, okay, I'm in the right place. I'm in the right place. It really just put my heart at ease in such a beautiful way. And that's one of the things that I really appreciate about you, Caitlyn, is just how welcoming, how excited you are to see people. You're just excited for life, really. And that warm embrace that you offered me just through being so happy to see me, even though I was late, it just opened me up in a really beautiful way. And I think that if not for that experience, I might have had a really different time during those first few experiences with Fit for Service. So I want to thank you for that.
Yes.
And just express like how wonderful it was to just be nurtured in that way.
Wow. I'm so glad you remember that. I remember it vividly also. And it's really, really beautiful to reflect back on that very first group. You were part of the first community, and we've had many cohorts flow through the Fit for Service program at this point, 6 years in. And at that time, our primary hub at that time was on Instagram. And so I really care. Like, that is one of the things that I know is part of my, my gift to the world is actually my capacity to really care. And I cared a lot back then, and I still do, but I went the full Instagram stalking with like every member. I was like, okay, I want to know this person, but it makes me giggle now because we're all such good friends. To look back on what I said to you, like, you're here. It feels like a bigger soul relationship, something about you, like my higher self knew that there was going to be a friendship that was going to, surpass beyond the original dynamics of me, being in the coach role or whatever it was. And I'm glad that you could feel that, because I think that that's really what I bring to everything I do is sincere excitement. And I think it might even be sort of like like my highest power or my sacred role is actually cheerleader, I think. And we both have that, but it's like
so much in common.
It's so funny because like that day when we met, I just kept thinking, I cannot wait until Brittany gets to meet Caitlyn. They are going to love each other so much. And I remember even having a conversation with Brittany on the phone. And I was like, well, and Caitlyn's the first person I met, and you're going to love her. You will just fall in love. It's just inevitable.
And I got to join Jonah in Tulum in 2019. I just came as his spouse and was getting to have some nice beach time while he was in workshops. And I did get to interact with some of the staff, and they had invited me to join the gratitude workshop that Aubrey was offering. And I was really apprehensive to show up because I hadn't actually invested in the program. I'm like, I didn't pay for this. Am I able to be there? And I remember specifically walking the beach, and I had this pain in my left shoulder, right on the back of my heart. And I had it for a while. And so I was walking, and it was actually getting significantly worse. And once I arrived, I think it was just really, really nervous to get there and to not be a part of the program. And like, can I sneak in? Will anybody see me? And of course, you spotted me right away. And I was like, I don't know if I belong here. I know I didn't pay to be here. And somebody told me to come, and you said, you are so welcome, sister. And you welcomed me with this big hug, this big heart hug. And throughout that workshop, it was actually extremely emotional for me because we were manifesting and building gratitude for the things that we were desiring and actually living in that moment. And one of the things I was really grateful for was becoming a grandmother. And now that we're sitting here today, I'm like, that is a possibility because I got a baby growing. But I could feel the pain dissipating. And it was a somatic experience. It was a somatic experience I was able to identify that you helped me release. And I identified that as fear of rejection. I wasn't sure what was going to happen when I got there. And, it's the worst when you show up somewhere and they're like, you're not on the list. Yeah. You get out of here. You didn't pay. You don't belong. So this really deep-seated fear of rejection was very much alleviated in our interaction. And so I really want to thank you for that and that welcoming that Jonah got to experience, but even a deeper somatic experience that I had had.
Wow, that's so amazing to learn that part of the story, just to know that these little moments matter. And I really feel like that's something that, we can take for granted is you never know the just right moment of being available to somebody and meeting their expectation in a new way that actually heals. It actually transforms a core belief or a deep fear. And so how cool to know that, we've been through so much over the years and, you two I'm so happy for the chapter that you're entering as parents. And I'm so honored. What a fun flashback moment.
And I have one more too, because you and I had a wild Burning Man in 2019 separately, and we didn't know each other then. And then we were in Malibu together, and that was shortly after Burning Man. But you and I finally were able to connect in on our experiences. And man, to just get to share with somebody and to have a similar experience, even though we didn't know each other then, that also revealed and released a lot of shame for me, because I was carrying shame over my experience. And so to get to share vulnerably of what really happened and the challenges, and you and I both experience, similar challenges, but different.
Yeah.
And I would love to hear how shame has shown up for you and how you've helped release shame. And let's get into that.
Yes. I'm so glad you brought that up and brought it into the conversation, because you did that for me as well. Mm-hmm. That year, 2019, I'd been on my spiritual self-healing and spiritual discovery journey for a number of years at that point. But that was the first year, 2019, where I really stepped in and claimed my path of service. And I dared to, trust that I had at that point enough to share. And it wasn't just the quest for me with myself, but it was like, okay, I've got these tools and, I have this opportunity to help people. And there was a sort of shift happening in me where I was beginning to trust myself as a teacher, as a guide, as a, at that time, I think of myself more right now as kind of a guide facilitator. There's like a different quality to it, but I was a coach, and like, this was my program, and I had a lot of pride in that, and I still do. But I had a lot of patterns of self-destruction historically that came from, addictive behaviors that were really self-soothing. I understand now ways of self-soothing, intense emotional energy in my body. And I had been using, alcohol or drugs in different scenarios, or social, like this real, it was for me very socially oriented. It was like I wanted to feel secure in social environments because it made me so nervous.
Well, I mean, can anybody else attest to being awkward in social situations and then reaching for the drink, reaching for the substance?
Yeah. Yes. And it's sort of like an adult pacifier. And I have a lot of compassion for it now. But at that point, it's taken me a long time to feel compassion with myself around it, because at that point, the pattern was over-soothe, to put it in a sweet way, behave in ways that generated more shame. So I would, be really inhibitionless, or really compromise my well-being, or, have interactions with people that I felt shame about afterwards. Mm-hmm. So then the shame was fed, and then that shame wanted to be soothed. And so it was like a constant cycle. And so for me at Burning Man, for example, that year, that was a huge breaking point in my path, because I was in a situation, in a relationship I was in at that time, where I was feeling so much shame, anger, jealousy, pain, and it kind of exploded at Burning Man. And I went to all of these coping strategies, which was really substance oriented. And Burning Man is like, there's no limits there, really. There's no last call. There's no bedtime. There's no,
nothing closes down.
Yes. So if you
Burning Man never shuts down.
And there's always something to be found. And so I ended up having a really scary moment where I lost, I didn't remember what I'd done. And I kind of destroyed the relationship. It was on a more compassionate lens. My higher self was like, this relationship is not serving. We're going to destroy this. But in the moment, it was very destructive rage and all this stuff that came through me, which taught me a lot over time about suppression of anger and suppression of boundaries and suppression of truth. But at that point, I was a coach, and there were other people from Fit for Service in Burning Man that I had been connecting with, and we had meetups. And the fact that I could still go that far to lose control and be self-harming in a way, really, really shook me. And I felt so much shame afterwards. Like, this is not the person I want to be now. And I can't believe this has happened in front of my community to a degree. There was a sense of that. And so when I got to finally connect with you and talk to you about that terror of losing control and the shame that arose from it, and learn that like, hey, we're all human here. The points where I feel the most shame are actually medicine for people that I serve. And so that was a turning point where I got to both really take it seriously. Like, what does it take to evolve beyond these coping strategies that I have, to value my life and my well-being more than this security blanket that I create through these patterns. And also lean into who you really are. Lean into your story. Lean into those things that you think you need to hide and overcome and pretend didn't ever happen because you're this new version of yourself. It's like, actually, the medicine is in there, because shame can be very limiting. It can be very anti-life force. And I think it has kind of a really bad rap. But what I do know about the emotions at this point in my life is that they all are born from love, every single emotion. So shame's impulse is it's trying to keep you secure in your tribe. And as human beings, that's very important. So it's intelligent. It's scanning the field. It's like, am I going to be safe if I behave this way? Oh, no, not getting good feedback there. Vibrate shame. That's going to help me adapt to stay included, because it's really important for human survival. But ultimately, beyond that checkpoint, if it's not conscious, if we don't actually choose, is this an inhibition that I really want to create with myself, and it's happening from an unconscious or subconscious place, it can end up trimming the wings of so many of our beautiful, original, authentic expressions. Mm-hmm. And so I see it all the time with people in dance. It's like so much shame holding the body in a box, so much shame, sharing from the heart, or being vulnerable, or expressing desire or love or any of these things. But really, shame is there for moments like, like what happened at Burning Man for me, which is actually serves you. Like, it's like, look at what happened here, and check in and decide consciously, is this a behavior that I want to claim? So in every form of work that I do, I think that that's really the heart of it, is really helping bring the relationship with shame into a more conscious place, so we can reclaim all the beautiful, authentic, playful expressions of ourselves that have been inhibited and kept out of the room by shame for years and years of our lives.
I'm so fascinated by just the concept of shame and how shame manifests itself in people's lives. I can reflect on the times that I've really felt shame more recently in my adult life. It's a little bit more challenging for me to go back to my earlier years thinking of those moments of shame. But most recently, I think for me, I had a very big shame bomb in 2021 pertaining to our relationship, aspects of my sexuality, things that were just like I was masking, and really had this really intense ceremony of just looking at how many masks I've worn, how many lies I've told, and really, really opened up this box of shame. And there was one night at our home where I was just in it, so in it, and crying my eyes out, sobbing. But I knew, I had this intuition or this knowing that I really needed to feel it. Like I needed to allow this shame to be there and to just let it continue to move within my body. And that night I cried myself to sleep that night. And at one point, Brittany was wanting to comfort me and wanting to console me. And I remember just saying, like, I need to feel this. Like, I need to be in this for a while. And it was interesting for me to be in that experience, because I don't think in the past I would have allowed myself to. And I think that's something that is really common for a lot of people, is to hide from it, run away from it, ignore it, push it away. And maybe even more so in men. And for me, going through that experience and allowing the shame to be present, there was so much for me to learn from it. And I think there's still probably a lot for me to learn from my own shame. And I'm so thankful that I gave myself the permission and allowed myself to feel that. And I'm really leaning into my own self-confidence just as a man and as a human. And to me, that really means having a willingness to experience the full spectrum of my emotions. And I think for a long time, I wasn't willing to experience a lot of that. I've ran away from plenty of the intense or negative feelings. And for me to be able to give myself that permission and allow it really does, I feel like, opens me up to be able to fully express the more beautiful or more fun or more positive aspects of my emotional self. And I think that there's a lot that stands in the way for people in actually allowing their shame to be present.
Totally.
And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on what do you think really stands in the way for others, or maybe what stood in the way for you at times when you were experiencing that shame.
Wow. What a beautiful share. So much gold there. Absolutely. I feel like men, for sure, I think have been born into, largely, there's, majority of men have been born into a paradigm where emotions are shamed, period. Like all of them. Like joy is shamed. Curiosity is shamed. And this happens a lot for, young children. Excitement is shamed, sorrow, crying, expressing pain, and essentially on a very primal level, showing that you feel ashamed is also a sign of kind of like primitive weakness. It's like, we look for the people that are shameless and not, they're really like holding their center of gravity in a magnetic kind of way. And sometimes that's a mask. Right. Or it's a dissociative aspect. But really, we even shame our shame. There's shame is actually there as like,
that's what they call this shame spiral.
Shame spiraling.
Yes. It's like, I shouldn't feel sad or ashamed of this, or I shouldn't feel bad. And oh no. And then when we learn about the, potentially negative effects of carrying shame in the body, which is physiological, illness related, all of these different things, then when we see it, it can be even like, oh no, I'm feeling shame. I better not feel shame. I'm not going to let myself feel that. So to go back to what you were sharing about letting yourself go all the way in, something I definitely have tracked in myself, and seems like a pretty generally ubiquitous disposition towards emotions, is this very early developmental sort of subconscious belief that if we go all the way into an emotion, it will consume us, will never come out. So sadness, for a toddler, a toddler having a temper tantrum, or they don't get what they want, or they scrape their knee, when you're at that developmental stage, all there is the present moment. And so if you're feeling pain or you're disappointed or you're sad, it actually takes over the nervous system in that moment, because there isn't a lot of point of reference for future or past. Mm-hmm. And we remember that in our systems. And so if we don't mature with the emotions, allowing ourselves to, and what happens a lot when children are young, stop crying, behave. Mm-hmm. And that, like, instead of being like nurtured and guided all the way through the emotional experience and having it validated, it's hushed and silenced and shamed and punished. And so much of what we're carrying as adults, I'm 41 years old, like it's still in the developmental, like arrested development of very young ages in relation to, I think it's the end of the world if I'm this sad, like I can't bear it. And that's like a deep story that is only retrained if you go all the way into it. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we need support in that, because there is, aspects of getting lost in kind of like the bardos of sadness, right? We see that with depression and stuff. And so sometimes really big pockets of emotion need support to actually get through them, or you can, stay in that state for a long time. But for me, it's really about moving it through the body, and also finding ways to embrace it that are more playful. Like a term I started using this year is shadow play instead of shadow work. And so there's like trying to charge that relationship up with excitement again. Like this can be fun. And so one of my favorite tools for this is costuming and working with dance, because I take people through, particular emotional currents with each song. And I always invite them to bring one of those, you know, when you're talking about masks, like bring one of those characters forward that doesn't normally get the airtime and doesn't normally get to be honored. One of the ways I use this for myself was in 2021. Actually, I was going through a total...
We're in it together, sister.
I was going through a total, it felt like a kind of a nervous breakdown style dark night of the soul, where I was really confronting a lot of my relationship patterns, where I was really confronting the shadow part of me that was cruel. It was selfish, wasn't honest. And that was really hard for me, my ego. It's because I'm so nice and I have such a big heart. And it's like, my identity was like fritzing with that. Like, oh, I can't see that I'm being cruel. I can't see that I'm not being as honest as I could be. And so what I did as a practice for myself was I went all the way into cruel. And like for Halloween that year, I dressed up as my version of Cruella. And I bought like
so hot.
Thank you. But it was like, the evil one. I watched the film. I got dressed up and I was like, I had to almost like be with the part of myself that enjoyed that. But like my identity felt shame. My identity felt shame to admit. And that's where the shadow comes from, is the shame creates the shadow. The shame is like, this isn't you. This can't be shown. This is not okay. Don't. And so the truth of the full spectrum drops into the shadow. And the key is that whatever's in the shadow actually drives way more than what's in the light, because it's trying to be seen. So it's coming through in all the moments that we aren't conscious, which is why we're striving so much to develop consciousness more and be, in awareness as like a first value of this, is noticing what you don't notice about yourself. Like, what is your proclivity or your habit when you're not in conscious choice? And that's where we can start to get hints at what's hiding behind the shadow. So for me to go all the way into being a more honest person, being more loving, it was like, own that you're cruel sometimes, own that you're dishonest sometimes, like face your liar, and then bring her all the way into the spotlight, and then feel the sorrow, feel the shame, cry it out, bring it all the way through, and integrate that into, facing the part of me that's like, what are you scared of when you tell the truth? Like, now practice that. What's a more playful and interesting and exciting way to work with these parts of myself that I didn't have access to before? And then when I bring them in, I get that life force energy back that's been not being used because I'm using that life force to suppress my truth. And those parts of us have, whether that's sexual shame or shame for our rage, like for women, that was a huge part that I'm still rehabilitating, is the capacity to say no. And I'm angry at you, and hold that without it being reactive, explosive. That reactivity or that explosivity is alluding to how much energy is being suppressed in that rage. And so I'll feel low energy, tired, depleted, burnt out. And then a trigger will happen and it's like dragon's breath, rah, you know? And it's like, if I bring that home, I get access to that life force all the time and it gets to live in my body. I just have to practice letting it in. And that's something that my body hasn't known before. And so we're all in this really exciting, I think quite exciting journey of reclaiming these pockets of life force that live in the different parts of us that are hiding in the shadow.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
Here comes our guy.
Hey, little guy. Come to visit me.
So you mentioned that you've seen the shame come up for people in dance. For those that maybe don't know, can you tell us what an ecstatic dance is?
Oh, yes. So I got to give a shout out to, y'all might not know this. Maybe you do. My original ecstatic dance muse was actually Aubrey Marcus. I didn't know what ecstatic dance was in that frame until I came to Austin. I lived in Las Vegas for 5 years. Turns out I was kind of ecstatic dancing all the time, all along, like it was in the Dharma. But I loved raves and festivals, and anytime that I could go, creatively express myself and with my wardrobe or adornments, and also really lose myself in dancing. It was always a tool that I really, really gravitated towards, but I would always use substances to kind of like warm myself up and be like, okay. And then I'd be really in full freedom. When I came to back to Austin in 2016, 17, I went to an ecstatic dance at On It Gym where Aubrey Marcus was guiding it. And he does it in a way, now there's many forms, but he does it in a way where he takes you on a journey. And so he speaks with each song. And I had such a profound experience sober, and I was weeping on the floor. And I was like, wow, this is the most powerful experience I've ever had, because I've been able to bring my entire body into the journey instead of just my mind with like a guided meditation or a plant medicine journey. It was a lot of like realizations through the mind's eye, but this brought all of my body into it. And so I was immediately in love with the practice. And I started to kind of track what it was. And generally speaking, there's many different forms. Ecstatic dance is a practice where you get to, when we talk about ecstatic, we're getting into an almost trance state where there's no more mind. It's pure energy. Pure energy is like elevating the connective space. You can ecstatic dance on your own, but there's something about the field of a group where it's sort of like everyone is in this mindless, like we're losing all inhibition in a way that's taking us into levels of rapture and helping the energy actually work through the body in a way that's very liberating and very healing. And some people do it with no guidance. So you'll see like the silent disco or DJ ones where it's pure music, but the intention is generally, you can totally ecstatic dance with some substances in your system too. But the idea really, as far as I've encountered it, is that we don't need that. We just need the breath. We just need the body. We just need the music. We need the vibration. And then there's some that are more guided or use specific movements. And so finally in 2019, it was after Burning Man, I had this insight where I was like, I want to guide one for rage, because that was what came up for me at Burning Man. And so I put together this playlist for women's rage, and I told Aubrey about it, and he was like, okay, put your playlist together and then you've got to practice it and I'll be your person. So it was a women's rage ecstatic dance. And it was just me and him in the house in Sedona. And I had a microphone and he was like, you got to give me cues. And I was like, all right, like let it out. And I was so nervous. And it was purely for women. And it was
Aubrey,
hilarious. And
the ecstatic dance coach.
He totally is. I keep telling him, I'm like, you've got to coach this.
We need to have a program here.
He was probably going all out too. I imagine he just went fully into it.
And he cried.
Oh,
and at the end, he told me, he said, Catesy, which is what he calls me. He's like, you were meant to do this. And from then on, I was the ecstatic dance instructor for Fit for Service instead of him. So that's the background, little side story. But yeah.
And also with ecstatic dance, it's consensual. So you're typically supposed to be in your own energy system, not really, there is some interaction with others, but not touching. So it's this area that you can go and feel like there's not going to be men grinding on you. And you can just be in your center, in your space, in your dance, in your movement. I got
a little carried away with my Aubrey story, but it's so important that you brought this up, because it's actually the heart of it is, now, there's different kinds. There's contact dance, which is also a particular practice that comes through a lot of ecstatic dance. And I do believe that we can, share energy, right? But something that's a tenet for it, for me and for a lot of practitioners, is this is for you individually. Like, go into yourself. If you need to close your eyes for the beginning or most of it to really be with yourself, like find all of those areas within yourself where you're holding back, where you're becoming self-conscious. So I'll see this a lot in the space where I can feel the people that are actually looking around, to see if what other people are doing or how they should behave or feeling self-conscious about dancing. And I noticed that only from the space of, I want to be able to invite them to let go more and to explore the way their body wants to move. So letting the body lead, letting the body, shake off the containment of the mind and really show us, what movement is needed here to liberate this emotional energy that's been, held back for who knows how long. So yeah, it's a really, really big part of it. It's like, it's not about no grinding, no holding hands and dancing and making a dance circle. And
it's not about showing off.
Yes.
And as a cheerleader, past cheerleader, there's so much structure, right? There's so much structure to dance. And whether you're a ballerina or hip hop dancer or whatever, there's style to dance. And so to completely strip that away, that's been really freeing for me. And ecstatic dance is like, I don't have to be doing anything specific, and letting go of the cheerleader and the structure has been really powerful.
Yeah. That's another thing that I really try to bring into everything I do, whether it's, facilitation or even writing poetry or being at a party or anything, is trying to create a field of permission. And so like, when I start or a little ways into the dance, I'll get super weird, like noodle, like let's be a noodle,
Well, just moving the body how it needs to, like getting a good stretch.
Yes. Or like the balloon guys in front of the car.
Whacking,
The
wacky
wailing, inflatable, flailing arm tube man.
Never heard that. That's exactly what that is. Exactly. Yeah. Who doesn't need that? More of that.
I bet you have a really good example of like a grown man, because in Fit for Service, there's such a wide range of age. Mm-hmm. And through your poetry, through your ecstatic dance guidance, like I'd love to hear if you have an example of someone really just breaking free and they have their first ecstatic dance or first poetry workshop and they, a grown man like Aubrey crying on the ground. That's pretty great, right? It's a pretty great result.
Pretty great result. Yeah, I've seen it so much. What I really love is getting to work with people over time. One session is usually there's an aha and a breakthrough by the end. And I'll get a lot of feedback about that from people. But what's really been profound is watching when I get to work with somebody over the course of a year, at multiple different events. And I remember specifically, actually, one was a woman who she was in complete shutdown. She'd been abused by her former husband. She had been basically like punished for her natural expression again and again. She was, struggling with her health, feeling super self-conscious. And she was really, it was really confronting to her to dance in front of other people. And she shared this with me afterwards. And she was kind of, comforting and holding herself and a little bit shaky. And she also thanked me because over the course of the dance, she felt that and she continued to dance into it. And sometimes one of the reasons we guard our bodies is because once we move them, those feelings that have been protected are going to start to come to the surface and we have to feel them. And that can be really, really challenging or scary for many people. And getting to work with her over time, every dance she came to, she got freer and freer and freer. And by the end of her journey with us, she was at Arcadia in like a full costume with like crazy like boob things and like, these like circular like John Lennon glasses. And she's now a breathwork facilitator. She's a completely like, she's just thriving, her voice, everything. And I know that dance was the absolute, like, it was the thing she was the most resistant to. And I've seen this so many times with men as well, just watching and hearing the feedback of this was the one thing that I dreaded. And this is actually why I challenge people to wear costumes. They hate to love it. It's actually
me and Jonah.
Except for you two. You guys are born for this stuff. But people usually really have a hard time with it because they're like, what is my costume going to be cool? Like, what should I do? The should word. And then there's all this concern and stress and then they show up and it's like a work of art. Their unique story has birthed this expression through their adornment that I get to see a side of them. They get to see a side of them that they didn't know was inside. And then that's a field of permission on the body that's like, I don't have to behave like, everyday me. I get to behave like this part of me, and so much more comes through. And that's my favorite part, I think, is seeing all the people that kind of grown and then work super hard on their costumes and then show up and are so proud. And they're just like, here I am.
Yes.
It's the best.
I think it was that Halloween in 2020 that we really fell in love. Our love like really deepened.
Yes. Oh,
getting to Jonah was just highlighting earlier when we were chatting before this of just how much our inner children love each other and love to play, love to dress up. And yeah, I think we feed each other's inner children monsters.
I love our monsters. I love them.
It's also just so cool to be encouraged to express yourself in a new and different way. Like having the permission slip to just show up as your weirdest, or show up as your scariest, or show up as, what you've been avoiding, and just to have that full permission to just really be able to express that is so bitchin' and so powerful for people.
I love that.
And speaking of expression, you also express in a lot of ways through your poetry, and you just wrote a book.
I did.
Love to hear
Tell us more.
I would love to share. It's funny. I feel like I just wrote a book, but actually the book itself I wrote over the past 5+ years in pieces. It's a poetry collection. It's massive because it's been, it's spanning years of my life. But it's called Ridiculous Masterpiece. And
yes. Great name.
It's really fun. It's the title itself, Ridiculous Masterpiece, is about life. And that was really my aha moment was, I've been through a lot of painful things, as many of us have. I've experienced a lot of loss, and also being stuck with myself and frustrated with my own patterns and in that loop of suffering with myself. And so the first half of the book really, it contains a lot of poetry that was born from those big emotions. So my rage, my pain, my addictive behaviors, my heartbreak, and also my passion. Really, it's the passions. And then along the way, through the years that I wrote that work, I started to have these moments of magic where everything came together. And you start to realize like, oh, there was meaning in all of it. It wouldn't be the masterpiece that it is if it wasn't for all of these threads that were just maybe brutal sometimes, or ugly, or completely confusing. And as I started to have those moments of grace, where I started to see the bigger picture, and there was like this cosmic giggle that's like, it is a ridiculous masterpiece. Like, whoa, it all had meaning. It all was, leading to this. And I love that about getting into this season of my life is, I'm starting to see where the threads connect. And when I see them, it opens me up into taking myself off of like Caitlyn and her dramas and all this inner, personal stuff, and then zooming out at the masterpiece that we're a part of. And then that gives me reverence, devotion, and gratitude to the divine. And so I put the book into a map, like a stage play. And so there's Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3 is all about my relationship with the divine, and how that focal point turns in from the suffering into the breakthrough, into this new higher relationship that is just the wonder, awe, and appreciation for what I get to be a part of in these small ways with all of my personal drama. And so I spent years writing the different poems. And finally, I think I've got to say, big shame part for me is every year for the past like 2 or 3 years, I've been like, I'm finishing my book now. But there was something, I would get close, and there was something, I think, in the resistance point of, this is so vulnerable, and this is like really showing all of what's inside of me, that resistance would win at the last moment, and with shame, and it would put on different masks, like, oh, I'm too busy, or it's not ready yet. Or I would start to edit it and I'd cringe and be like, oh, it's not good enough. And I would like run away from it. And so finally this summer I have, thanks to some accountability and support from Aubrey and his team at Chakaruna Media, I got the right kind of reflection that was like, now's the time. There's a team here that can help you if you're ready to bring this book into the world. And I was like, God, I'm scared, but I'm so ready. It's been years coming. And so I put everything I had into compiling this collection, designing it, editing it. I did everything through my own heart and really had to again and again ask myself, what do I want this to be? What gets to be in here? What needs to be in here? And really going for that dare of like, yes, my story matters and it's worth sharing. And that's been uncomfortable at times, but I'm really proud to say that it's on its way now. And by the time that this show airs, it will be out in the world. So,
including an audio version.
Yes. I just finished recording this past week. And, that really reminds me of relating to what our conversation has ended up revolving around here. I feel like for me, the next integration piece is really I think there's levels to expression. So you guys are doing that here with this podcast. But for me, writing was always an outlet for the parts that I felt too nervous to talk about in a more public way, or even to, share with some of my partners or lovers or friends or whatever. I use writing as my channel to really express myself in a brave way. And I still wasn't using my voice. So I was using the pen, and it's been a super sacred process for me working with my red ink, which is what I work with in my ritual process with my truth. But then as I started to put this book together, I was like, okay, I have to speak these out loud because I won't know exactly the right, I won't know exactly which ones to put in, or like for me, the editing process was very much about speaking it. And then I got to record the audio version. And that was a whole new initiation into bringing all of those parts of me back through my body, through my voice, and noticing where the confidence wasn't there. And so I feel like this next chapter for me, and I think for many of us, it involves using the voice as well. And writing can be a really, really great first step and bridge to give a voice to those thoughts on the page. And then when we get to really start to integrate that through our bodies and through our throat chakras, it's like the final step, I think, in bringing it all the way home.
I'm so excited for it.
Thank you.
I know. I want to hear it. I want to hear it.
I'd love to hear too how poetry has been an outlet for those, the deeper emotions, including grief. And I know that you've mentioned going through great loss. And for somebody who's really wanting to start writing, wanting to start processing, like where would be a good place to start?
I think, so my father passed in 2020 of brain cancer. It happened really fast. He seemed to be in really relatively great health. And he was 63 when he was diagnosed, and 3 months later, he passed. And when I got the diagnosis, I thought I was already in just a state of absolute shock, thinking, oh, I might only have some years with him. I am still in a process of really digesting, I think on a deep nervous system level, the rapid nature of how I had to adjust to the reality that he was leaving. And it was through the processing of his death that I think brought me out of a lot of the distraction of life and brought me to writing as an absolute haven for, like, I did not know what else to do with that emotion. There was, a level of grief, and I know you understand this. It's so personal. It's so big. There's so much love and support in my life through friendship. And yet there's also a loneliness and grief always, because no matter how much someone can relate to you, they'll never have access to the unique relationship with you and that other person, and the immensity, the inner universe of that other person relating to the inner universe in you. And so 2020 was a really hard year for everyone. And it was, for me, coupled with the rapid decline of my father's health and ultimately his death. And what happened for me in the years prior to preceding is I started to actually look at a lot of things he wrote when he was younger. And he was such a talented poet. He was such a talented writer. It was so beautiful. And it was like, I didn't get to see that side of him until we went through all of his personal belongings. And I remember, one of the things that really made me want to pursue publishing work and like leaning into my path as a writer was I wanted to ultimately be able to honor the way that he lived through me and the fact that he wrote such powerful pieces and I, as his daughter, never got to hear them, let alone the world. And I remember having a really specific moment where I recognized that if I don't tell his story through my writing in some ways, even if that's indirectly, if I don't get to continue that mode of expression on our behalf, then his story dies with him and his work doesn't get shared the way that it can be, through me. And I could feel that if I were, it brought death to the center for me for a while. And it was like, what if it was all over in 3 months, the same way it was with my dad? And I was like, what would I do with that time? And it was even more clear. I remember the phrase in my mind that arose was, in the face of death, I want to give birth. I still want to give birth. And I want to birth what is mine to bring into the world. And I think with our poetry, with our children, with all of these things that we, create here, it's what is ours to bring into the world. And if we let fear win, if we let shame win, if we let comparison win and say, I'm not ready yet, and it needs to be better, that's really where I think tragedy starts to settle in at the end of a life, is that knowing that it's ours to bring, and that maybe we let fear, shame, and comparison discourage us. And so for it became very clear that, I don't have children yet, but if I do, they might find that one day and be like, like I felt with my dad, why didn't you share this? Like, this is brilliant. And I knew for myself, reading my father's work, it was so good. And I just wanted to share his voice so much. And it gave me the thing that kind of gets the ego out of the way, which is, okay, if you can't do it for yourself, do it for him. He would be proud of you. And in that way, I think he's still with me. He's with me in many ways, but he's still with me, being a big part of my why, that keeps me going, where shame might keep me from ever doing what is mine to do. So
it's beautiful.
It's legacy work, sister.
I love that.
Oh, it hits close to home. I recently went and helped my mom clean out this bedroom in her house that has kind of just turned into a storage unit. And my mom holds on to so much. She's very sentimental, which that somehow passed over me. I'm not nearly as sentimental as my mom is. And while we were going through a lot of the things, we found some of my dad's writing. And for him, it was more just kind of like notes about his business, notes about his relationship to God. Mm-hmm. And it was just so beautiful to find that writing. Granted, it wasn't this like amazing poem, but even just seeing something left behind that was like his words and his writing was just like, I wish I would have found that sooner. I wish I'd been able to read this a long time ago. It's been, I think, many years since my dad passed away, and being able to just reflect upon his words is so touching. And so I can just empathize for how impactful that probably was to see your dad's poetry and how fueling that must have been for you.
It really has been. And it just knowing, like, my dad wrote some poetry. A lot of what he wrote was he was a mathematician, so it was math equations. He would make calendars on graph paper and keep it in his pocket, and write journal entries here and there. But it was few and far between, and it all just reminds me that it's all so sacred. To me, paper that's been written on by somebody, and it's like, ooh, it's super. The journals, these things that are just an account, an artifact of having been here and having had an inner world and a story to tell. Any part of that story that we get to, come across later in life and look at the beautiful curvature of the handwriting and feel their presence. It reminds me of geography. Like it's like a fossil, like an artifact in the earth. That's like this being was here, and this is part of their story. And our stories are, I think, maybe one of the most sacred things about our lives. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, and being in this new chapter of our journey and our relationship and starting a family, it's just so present to me of how miraculous being a human is. Yeah. Just from the creation to like becoming this little fetus inside the womb to leading up to this development and being born and like, holy shit, it's miraculous. And so I love what you're saying about like being anything written down on a piece of paper. It is like this sacred artifact because every single one of us is a living miracle.
That's so true.
And wow, right? So like, why not write it down? Write down your story, write down your ideas, write down your thoughts.
Especially in the digital age that we are right now, AI is writing everything. So continuing for us to keep a journal, to use our hands, to write that handwritten card. We have cards from our grandmothers, and to get to see our grandmothers' handwriting when they were writing in cursive, and just to get to see their writing. I save every meaningful letter that I get, and you just think like, maybe this person might not be here again. And to be able to save that letter and save those words means so much.
It's really, really a treasure. And I think it's, some people have said, as I've been in this book publishing process, that like, that printed books are like a dying technology, that bookstores are dying. I don't think so, actually. I don't think so. I think it might be that trend for a while, but I think the human being through this is just my theory, but I feel like we're going to come full circle back to ourselves over time. It might be a challenging learning period, but the more we can be in our bodies, I was telling Eric, I think it was at the beginning of the year, my partner, I was looking at my cat, and I was feeling this sudden, I was on my phone, and I think we see this with, parents and children and stuff too, but I was on my phone for a long time, and I felt like, we're creating, I realized just that my cat was like this miracle presence just sitting there like, hi, only person I know, like pay attention to me. And I had to catch myself and come out of the phone. And I had this feeling of like, we're creating a world that's not fit for animals. And that includes our body. Our body is an animal. And we're going so much up into the mental realm. And this dissociation that's happening just naturally through being in the digital space, it's leaving behind the animal that has these emotions that need to move, that has these feelings that need to be spoken, that has these sacred artifacts that need to be painted or written or drawn or, constructed. And like, it's now is the time for us to revere this aspect of embodiment, I think more than ever, because it will be our anchor as we move through this collective journey of exploring the mental, the mental realm and the digital realm and the way that it's going to suck us there, and so we need the anchor of these embodied practices and creative practices to feel, to move that energy so we don't become, severed from the heart body. I think of it as like the heart body, this feeling animal that it's an instrument of divinity. It's an instrument it is the instrument through which all of our gifts flow. And so we're in a risky, a critical time. And I have a lot of faith that the bookstores won't die. The books won't die. If anything, they'll be the one last thing that we will have to hold on to and come back to.
Yeah. And just touching on the animal, getting to have a pet in our home, it's just so, so special. And they bring us back to the present moment and continue to help us be creative and give us love. And I bet you've had so much joy having your cats, and it really amplifies the space, right? Having something alive that counts on you to show up for, to be grounded for, to be embodied for.
It really, really does. They're little guides that way, It's a little reminder.
I'll be on my phone and Newman will sit there and go, "How?" I'm like, okay, I'll get off my phone.
Yeah, it's been really cool. I'm still taking baby steps towards motherhood. But having my 2 cats, I got them a year ago, and I went through a whole process where I was like, what have I done? Like, oh God, I can't travel without thinking about it now. They're knocking everything over. They're like bowling their bodies into my altars. It's never quite been the same, but then ultimately it taught me like the depth of love that starts to come through when I'm in my mother archetype, which happens for the cats. And I can only imagine, it's why, even though I'm kind of late to the game, I feel like, I want to know that I want to meet the capacity in me to love that much through motherhood, which I'm just so excited for you guys that you're entering. Everyone says that you never can imagine how much love you're going to feel. But if there's anything that keeps you down to earth, I would imagine it's giving birth to your first child and any children they will have, and just learning how much love you have inside through this, because you guys already are you're just the embodiment of so much generous and pure love as it is. So I'm just thrilled to watch and celebrate. Auntie Casey is here.
Well, it's definitely going to be quite a journey for us, right? Like there's a lot of challenges to come and hardships to come,
right?
Yeah.
And so much joy and bliss and ecstasy also. Like there's a lot down our path for sure.
Yeah, such a brave and beautiful path to take.
And we get to carry with us all of these lessons that we've learned through all of our past hardships and all of our past challenges, and take all of those integrated lessons and apply them, as wisdom into how we move forward in our lives together with a child and
our own ridiculous masterpiece.
That's right.
Right.
That's right. Exactly. Yes. Right? Yes. Yeah. Oh my gosh. And you're going to keep weaving with baby. Yeah, it's so true. And I think, so much of our patterns with emotions, with self-expression, with our art, with our shame, it's generational, and it's transferred down and down and down, and it's just absorbed and reinforced. And this is a Renaissance moment for humanity, where we are actually entering an unprecedented time, and we need to do everything we can for the next generation to be able to really continue as a species, I would say, but to be able to enter this new era without the burden of so much ancestral patterning that's perpetuating violence, perpetuating trauma, perpetuating suffering.
Absolutely.
You're doing it, and we're all doing this together. So I'm so excited for your child and your children, if it's children along the way, to get to be born into the results of the work that you've done.
Yeah, it's great because you were talking about your dad's writing, both your dad's writing, and your dad did a lot of self-help. A lot of his writing was some of his self-help work with Tony Robbins and different inspiration. And Jonah's continued to carry that with his coaching and with your own work. And so it's really neat to see the lineage of poetry and then the lineage of personal work. And it's really special. So as we're wrapping up, what words of wisdom would you give yourself when you were going through the greatest hardship of your life?
It's tough to answer this question because I don't know if my younger self would have ever believed or applied or listened to anything that I would say. I have a strong rebel in my shadow. I've had to tell Eric, I'm like, don't phrase it like that. Don't tell me what I should do. Like my rebel is going to be like, no. But presuming I had the purview that I have now and I could promise her something, part of it would be just know that you're going to be more than okay. That it all really works out better than you ever could have imagined. And yes, it will be painful. And yes, there will be hardship, but you're going to make it. So you can, I think a lot of the taxing on my system from stress that has come with the deep fear that I'm not going to survive, and to just be able to impart, to soften that survival mode that she was carrying, to say, you can sleep deeply tonight because you're gonna more than survive. That would have been a gift. And the other thing is, in terms of advice, is to really trust yourself, to go for it. It's a beautiful, wild, exciting feeling I'm having in my body, finally bringing to fruition so many big dreams I've had. And the only reason it's taken this long is because I didn't trust myself. And if I could have waved a magic wand, it would just be, go for it. Go for it. Trust yourself and go for it. And that is actually, I think, courage is one of the most beneficial. It is a magic container when you're brave, brave Caitlyn. That's what the blessing I want to put on her head is. She was brave. And that courage is in her heart. If she could have brought that all the way forward and trusted herself and been, even braver to just take the dares and take the risks. I really believe that that's where the magic comes from, is every time that you're brave. Oh man, there's so much I want to say to her. And it's funny. I'm laughing as I say this because she was brave. And I've got to give credit to my younger self. And I think that's something that I haven't done enough, is actually say thank you. Thank you for going through what you went through and making it here so I could live this moment.
Yeah, and so that you could be here with us.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm like, look at your friends, girl. They're the best.
Oh, thank you so much for being here today, Caitlyn.
Yeah. I want to hear about Playhouse Expressive.
Yes.
And also League of Queens.
Yes.
And where people can find you and participate in your amazing offerings.
Thank you for asking. Yeah. So I think right now in the future, the best place to find updates on where you can find my work is going to be at poetqueen.com. And you can follow my Instagram. I have link in bio, going on up there. If you go to the link in my bio, there's going to be a little list. But it's at the Poet Queen on Instagram, assuming Instagram still exists in a couple months. I think it will.
I'm sure it will.
But I'm on Substack as well. Caitlyn Howe on Substack. So my writing is in there intermittently. I'm looking forward to writing a lot more now that I moved through the book process. But my book itself will be out. You can find me on Amazon and on chakaruna.com. And I am going to be producing in 2025 multiple programs for both my League of Queens all women's program. It's about archetypal activation in calling forward the queen in different areas of your life and celebrating the queen that you naturally are just by being born, just by carrying the dignity in your spine of your self-love. We should have a program live for March, which will be an in-person retreat and some virtual programs as well. And finally, my new baby is the Playhouse Expressive. This is a virtual space where I will be hosting monthly poetry classes a virtual community open mic for you to come use your voice to share your poetry or any other kind of art form that you've created, whether that's a song or, stand-up comedy. Yes, exactly. We're going to have story time nights in the open mic, and there will be a special channel for doing some devotional practices called the Temple of Wow. And also the wardrobe is going to be a costume creation monthly call, as well as ecstatic dance playlists that you can come get your dance on, work on the costume piece, share your art. And it's all about personal expression and community in expression. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
You heard it here
so
first.
many offerings.
Yeah.
So cool. Well,
I'm really excited.
Y'all heard it. Get out there and express yourself. Write the poetry, do the dance, especially if it's uncomfortable.
Write it down.
Write it down. Be brave. And just keep on trusting yourself, baby.
And drop in with a friend, because when we share vulnerably, it releases shame.
Mm-hmm. Invite someone to hold you. Mm-hmm. It's one of the gifts. I think about the card you pulled before this, ask for help. I think it's one of the gifts that we forget we're giving people when we say, you know what, I could really use some help right now. And in allowing people to hold space for those things that you think nobody could dare to look at, it can be a huge gift to another person. So lean into that. And blessing all of the beautiful, unique expression, the full spectrum expression in each and every one of you who's listening. And thank you both so much for having me.
Thanks you so much, sister. We love you.
Love you too.
Be well.
Be well. Thank you for joining us today on the BZen Wellness Podcast. We hope this episode leaves you feeling inspired to continue on your personal quest.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to our podcast and leave us a review. And if you want to learn more or dive deeper into these topics, visit our website and follow us on social media.
Until then, friends, breathe deep, take some time for yourself, and remember, you are already whole. Goodbye, dear hearts.